channel. My name's Adrian. Today I'm going to talk about Eldritch Gits. So the Gits are well, it's a trilogy of books currently. There are more coming, and I've been planning on doing a Gits book for a while. I've played both fantasy and space Git, and as luck would have it, the latest Kickstarter for Eldritch Gits, which is this book here, has arrived. So I thought, you know what, I'll start with the latest, and then you'll get a feel for how the systems work, how the games work. In essence, it's the same D20 rule system, roll under and roll below, depending on whether it's a skill check, an attack, or a save. But I'll get into that. And this one is, well, with Eldritch, as you can guess in the title, it's Cthulhu based. But this is a specific location. It's Chicago, 1920s, between 1920s and 1930s. And you're actually, in the game, you're not the nicest of people. Well, it's a Gits title, as in you'd expect from a Gits title. In fantasy, you're not the nicest, the most heroic of fantasy characters. So in this one, you are playing gang members, sort of Al Capone, that sort of era, and you are your own gang. Before I get into the rule, I'll show you where you can pick it up from. And nicely, is currently on sale because this is recently come out. So we've got here we go on Drive-Thru RPG. So Eldritch Gits Cthulhu Noir, which effectively is, it's that very much feels like that serial 1920s detective stuff, but you're not playing the detectives. You are this time playing the gangsters. If you go to Drive-Thru RPG, you can pick it up, the PDF copy. The physical copy, or the softback cover, which is what I've got over here, is currently on sale. And if you pick it up, you will get the PDF for the same price. Also included is a Games Master pack, which is here, okay? And I'll show you what's included in the Games Master pack when I sort of just get off this page, if that makes sense, and when we sort of get into the book. So here we go, 1920s, USA, making the most of gangsters, and here's some of the artwork that's actually, I think it's on the Games Master screen, that is included in here. It's written by Jay Lissard and a variety of artists here. So we've got Jeff Whitty, Milton Das, and Dean Spencer. Jay and Jeff both are friends of mine, so I'm just for full integrity purposes on there. When or if you're going to pick this up, please do consider using my affiliate link. I did back this on the Kickstarter project, but Jay was kind enough to actually send me a physical copy. I don't back many physical copies on Kickstarter just because I like to try and back as much as I can. And, that T word that we don't mention, and shipping and fees, which tends to... I'd rather back more things at PDF than have less things but have physical copies, if that makes sense, because Lulu is my friend. Right, so let me just show you. So the book itself comes in at 150 pages. So let's just get into what's included. As I said, we have got, so here's the sort of PDF front cover. Say if you get a physical copy, this actually is the cover. Actually, I'll just jump back to the Drive-Thru RPG just to show you the actual cover here. So this is the cover of the book, which again is done by Jeff Whitty. I actually did an interview with both Jeff and Jay, which I'll tag at the end of this video. So if you want to find out more about Gits and the other things that are coming out. Before I get into the book, let me just show you a few things. So it's going to come with 5 pre-generated characters, and the character sheet is this. So they will look like this. There's also artwork for each of the characters and names, and a little bit of background in there. You've got a Eldritch Gits hideout sheet. So the player characters together will create their own hideout, which will give them some benefits and places to hide, but also generate some income and wealth for them. As you can see here, it's going to generate them $10 a day. So as they go and buy things, you will expand out the hideout. And then you've got a 8-page Games Master screen that you can print off and just hang in front of, any sort of cardboard existing Games Master screen that you've got, with loads and loads of useful and handy tables. But so that's all included if you go for the PDF version. But the main thing we want to look at now is the core rulebook. So here we've got Eldritch Gits, and I'm just going to start with a negative, and I'm really sorry, Jay, but I do not like this font. As we go through the book, this font is standard throughout. I can see why it's been used. It's very 1920s. As a dyslexic, it's hideous to read, and it takes quite a bit of extra time to pick up. It's spot on what you're going for, but personally, most other people might not struggle with it. Personally, I found it quite difficult throughout the book. But luckily, the book itself is being covered on the channel, so it means I do like it. Okay, so here we've got the inside cover here. So it is set in 1920s to 1930s USA. Layout and design, sorry, written and designed by Jay Lazard. Say layout by Jay, and then the artists are in here. We're then going to get into the contents, which is hyperlinked, which is always a massive plus. And we're going to go through an introduction first. This book is laid out mostly incredibly well. There's one bit that I'll explain when I get there that kind of, I'm like, huh? But other than that, the first section of the book is basically player facing, which I really, really like. So you're going to get an introduction, so the basic of what the book's about, an idea of the roles, the system works. You're then getting into character creation, how all that works, skills, talents, commerce, which is your money section, rules for combat, magic, two different unique magic systems for this game. So we've got ritual magic and seagull magic, and then that's it for players. You're out. Games Master, everything from there in is the Games Master section, hints and tips for running the game, things like that. We then get Heroes and Foes, which is, what's that, 32 pages of NPCs, monsters, bad guys, and then finally it ends with a one-shot adventure, which said, if it's a unique setting in a book, I really appreciate it when creators actually put a one-shot adventure in. So that's a good, it's a layout really good. But here we got the introduction, which again talks about Chicago in the 1928, a little bit about mobsters, bootleggers, gambling, because obviously this was a time of Prohibition, so people were dry. It was a dry country, which seems crazy that a country for, I think it's about 10 years that alcohol was banned for. It wasn't like a few weeks and everyone went, that's a bad idea. So you and your gang, so you're part of an enterprise. You're not exactly legal, and it is illegal bootlegging and being a gangster. But it's time of jazz, Al Capone, G-Men, etc. But the basics of the game uses a simple roll under, roll over system. If you are making a save, resisting things, you take your attribute and you're rolling under. Everything else, it's like 5th edition. It's like Pathfinder. You roll a d20. You're looking to achieve over a number, which in this is a DN, or the defense class, or AC. It's exactly the same thing, but it's called defense class in this, to hit the person. You're also going to have 6 attributes, which we'll come on to in a second, and the attributes are going to range from a 9 to an 18. All of them are going to start at 10, and then actually we'll show you how that is going to grow, and your character is going to go on. Because one thing this does really well is backgrounds. When you're creating your character, it was the thing that really brought me into Fantasy Gits, and creating the character was an absolute blast, which we'll talk about when we get there. There's a lot of skills in this game, and all the skills going to do is give you a +1 to that roll over ability. And if you can get multiple versions of the skill, you can get to a maximum of +5. I think it's +4 on character creation. I'm not sure. Sorry, yeah, if the character is oh no, it is +5, so I'm confusing things here. You've got advantage, disadvantage, so if things are favourable, you get to roll 2d20, pick the highest. If it's, disfavourable, if that's a word, you roll 2d20 and pick the lowest. And then we've got some abbreviations in here. So PC and Gits, the character, NPC, non-player character, GM is the person running the game. So characteristics of the players, there are 6, and they will range from 9 to 18. Okay, and you've got strength, dex, health, intelligence, insight, and charisma. Most of which, if you're experienced or even relatively new to games mastering or playing in RPGs, you probably should get these. But strength is your ability for physical lifting, pushing, attacking with your hands and weapons. Dexterity is agility, movement for jumping, thievery, using ranged weapons. Health is your ability to take damage, how physically tough you are. Intelligence, how bright you are, how quick you are, but also it helps with your sanity. Yes, there's a good chance you're going to go slightly insane as a player character as this goes on. Insight is your mental of strength, courage, resisting mental attacks, and wisdom. And then finally, we've got charisma, how charming, nice, or how intimidating you are. Okay, so they all start at 10 at character creation, but you can move up to 2 of them down to, you can move them down to 9 and increase 2 to 11 when you start. Well, that has to be done before you finally finish character. All characters are going to begin their adult life at 18, and then you will have terms in backgrounds which can last for 5 years. Okay. Upbringing. This is your background. Well, it's actually your upbringing because background is a specific thing in here. And this is your family. Were you brought up in poverty all the way through to wealthy? And each upbringing is going to give you a couple of attribute points and a couple, well, 3 skills. Now, as you can see, we're going to be getting pluses going on. Depending on what you randomly roll will determine your background. Now, you roll a d6, 2, 3, and 4, 5. So most characters will be working class or middle class, okay? But you might end up with poverty. One thing this game does brilliantly, well, actually, depending on who you are, if you're looking for balanced characters and you want all the players to be the same, this probably isn't for you. And I'm not saying don't play it, because having random character generation is one of the most fun things you can actually do in role-playing. It's the reason why Travelers existed for 40 plus years. The good news is, unlike Traveler, you can't actually die in your character creation. Okay, so you will then create your gang, and then it talks about the hideout. Now, this is the bit that I find really strange in the book, because we're talking about your background, and then it jumps into creating your hideout together. And you choose your location, take some upgrades, the benefits of the upgrades, and I've got no issue with the hideout or the hideout rules. Just stick it at the back of the character generation. It just seems really strange that, how did you grow up? Yeah, here's your upbringing. Oh, I was wealthy, I was poor. Right, let's do our base. You kind of flow through to the character creation first. Then, because when you've got the characters together, I think that's going to be a better time when everyone knows what they're playing to build the kind of hideout that you want. And that, other than the font, really are my only 2 grumbles with this book. Because we're then going to get into the 6, you've got your 6 backgrounds to pick from and terms. So each character is going to start at 18. Hopefully I can explain this well enough. And every term you're going to roll on one of the random backgrounds. So, you can either pick the backgrounds or randomly pick it. Randomly roll it. But basically, you can start at 18, and you can have up to 4 goes at this. So maximum age your character will start at is 38, and the minimum is, you have to do 1, so you're going to start at 23, and different things are going to happen. Okay, you can. If you stay within the same background, you can specialize, which will make sense in a second. So we've got, again, these are all the things you do before you start joining your gang, which is here. Number 1 here, you can now join a gang. Okay, so you can roll up to a maximum of 4, or if you roll a 1, you can decide to start younger. But we've got an academic, citizen, criminal, doctor, dilettante, occultist, and soldier. Or you might end up in prison. You don't start in prison, but some of these. So I'm going to just pick on the doctor for argument's sake. Okay, so as you get to character creation, you've got a prerequisite here. So you will need a dex or int of 11, which means you haven't changed any stats yet, but your upbringing might have actually allowed you to have a +1 in it. If not, this is where you can do a -1 and put some attribute at 11. Okay, and so what you do is in the very first term, so it's said here you can have a maximum of 4 terms. You can switch to others if you want, but I'm not sure players are going to want to. You will roll a d6 and you'll get a random attribute +1 and a random skill at +1. Okay, so that's your very first term. So that's going to take you to 23. Now, if you'll also then roll on the events, which is a D20 table, and this is going to give you things like additional talents, skills, attributes, contacts. You can have injuries, which might reduce some of the skills. You might have an encounter or a magical item, or you might learn a secret, because players know nothing realistically about the cults and Cthulhu at character creation. You've done your first term, but what this means is when you get into your second term, you can roll on this table, but you can also choose to specialize. So you can either go to a completely different occupation and background and start again from scratch, or you get a bonus for staying and you get this specialization here. So you get to roll on an attribute again. You then get to roll a second one on these skills, but also you then get to pick whether you're a practitioner, a field medic, or a surgeon, and all of the backgrounds have got these options. So you're going to gain a bonus skill for choosing to specialize. Again, you get to roll the events. All of the event tables on a 1 on the D20 will say you can now join a gang. Now, you don't have to. You can take a further term background in this, or another term in the background, or switch to a different one, or you can join a gang. But some of them will say go to prison. I'm not sure if there's one on this one. Typically I pick one that doesn't have go to prison on it. Why can't I find it? Okay, but anyway, some of them will say go to prison, but good news is you still get to stay in prison, and you do get attribute skills. The only downside is there's no specializations in prison, you know. But it is going to give you, you know, again, you can take injuries on shift and join the gangs early and stuff like that. You know, you become a mob talent. You become friends with a mob contact. Okay, so as with all these random tables where it says, you know, here you pick a skill, you will then just go on to this table here and roll 2d8 and pick the +1 in the skills. And the same thing for talents. Talents are things like feats in other games and features. These are special abilities that basically break some of the rules of the games to give the players an advantage. And then we've got injury tables. So say if you do roll an injury, you might end up starting the game with less hit points. You know, poked in the eye, it's harder to search for things, etc. This then just explains the background specializations. So for example, the doctor practitioner, you had a small practice handing out medicines, diagnosis, illness, selling drugs. So this is everything that you did up until you became an adventurer or player. Okay. And then we'll get into what is your role within the party. Weirdly, there isn't a title for this. I just had to work it out. And you can be an adventurer in here, brains, charmer, enforcer, or scoundrel. So these are the 5 roles that you are currently doing. And when you come into this, you're going to get your starting equipment for whatever it is you do. You're going to get some talents where you can pick from one, and then you get a random character trait as well. So adventurer, as you know, your Indiana Jones type characters, so your brains, your homes, library, bookshops, etc. The charmer, your charming one, your face man. The enforcer, the strength type character that likes to sort of go and break legs if people don't pay on time. And then finder, you've got your overall sort of charming scoundrel thief type character. That pretty much is character creation. Then we get into the derived attributes. So we're going to have wounds, defense, initiative. So wounds, amount of health and damage that you can take. Defense, how hard it is to hit you. Initiative, how quick you're going to react. Movement is 30 feet pretty much for everyone. You have got encumbrance rules. Sanity, your sanity is going to start at 1 as you meet eldritch creatures, find spell books, things like that. Your sanity will get higher, and once you get to 6, then you're going to be rolling on some bit of a nasty table. Your power is made up between your health and intelligence, so if you do ever learn to cast spells or rituals, this is where you're going to have it. Then finally we've got luck points here, so every character is going to have a number of luck points, could be used to re-roll a fail, and basically your luck points are made up from the total amount of your attributes. And obviously as you gain more attributes, as you gain experience, this isn't a level-based game, this is an experience-based game, your luck will actually increase. So as you get more powerful, you will go up. And here it is. Here's the experience tables. And experience is done in it's a really different way, because what it stops people doing is having the dump stat int. Because the more, at the end of sessions, or when the games master decide that you've hit a milestone, you will roll your experience die. And your experience die will determine just how much experience you're going to get at that point. And depending on what your int modifier is, will determine the largest of the roll. Okay. We've then got what things cost for changing experience, or if you want to just spend 5 and roll on the super random experience table, this is what I would do, just to gain it's cheap. It's the cheapest way of getting powers and abilities, but you don't know what you're going to get. But it's a D100. Go and have fun with it. It's the cheapest way of getting up. I used to do that in Blood Bowl, when Blood Bowl brought out the random tables. We've then got a wonderful example of character creation. So if any of what I said sounded complicated or difficult, just read these couple of pages here. Then got skills. I say it says that most characters will have 15 skills, but skills are related to attributes, obviously. S strength, D for dex, etc. And this is So when you're rolling, well, we'll get onto how the game works in a second, but say the skills will give you a +1 to that roll on that d20 rolling above. And so you can see there's a lot of skills in here. And then we've got talents, which is say things like traits and special abilities and feats and features. And these are split into 2 different types. We've got ones that are for your position in your gang. So if you're the adventurer type, you can pick things like the acrobats. You gain advantage when swinging and leaping. And then there are general ones. So the adventurer ones only the adventurer can have. The general ones anyone can have. So if you want to have a police contact, you can just have that one there. But again, random rolls determine this. Money in here, so it's based in the 1920s to 1930s money. It's all in US dollars, and you know it's basically things you can buy like binoculars, candles, you know, oil flask. It tells you how many slots you get for encumbrance. So characters with a strength of 12 will come with 12 slots. So depending on what your strength determines how much you can carry. Clothing, travel, weapons in here. So obviously, you know, you've got things like the classic Tommy gun, even down to keeping the crossbow. And but everyone's going to have really, I think, Tommy gun, baseball bat, and the occasional sword, cane in here. Then we've got some books which you can randomly find in the game, and a D100 roll here, and it just talks about sigils or rituals, which we'll talk about once we get to the magic system. Different vehicles, magic supplies in here. Range uses I think most people are now used to this: close, near, far, very far distance. So close can be touched. Target is near is 15 foot. Far is 30 to 50 foot. Very far, 60 to 100 foot. And then distance is anything else from there. So players can move round about up to far without any issues. We've then got the rules. So how does the game work? So each attribute will create a modifier. So if you basically take the attribute. So if you don't have a skill and you're just trying to attack someone, you will just roll your strength. Okay, and if you've got a strength of 13 in the example, you take 10 from it. So every skill check, you're going to take 10 off, and then that gives you a 3, and then you're going to roll a d20, add 3 to it. Simple as that. Okay, if you've got a skill of +2, you're going to get +5 to the roll. That's it. That is in essence it. So we've got advantage, disadvantage in here. You can aid each other and, you know, help people have advantage if you're helping each other out. Standard difficulty levels. So a standard check, the players are going to need to roll 10 or more. If it's easy, 5. So you would just, you know, again, like a d20 rollover, you will just determine the games master. You can either tell them before they roll or just let them know they've passed or failed. Saving throws this is where it's rolling under, and you're looking to roll equal to or under the relevant attribute. So if the players are bleeding or drowning, you'd roll your strength. So again, in the example of the 13, going to roll a d20, and you're looking to roll 13 or less. It's that simple. Sanity and fear. Say sanity is going to begin with 1. Once you get up to 6 from meeting things, then you will, well, your mind is broken and you may be collapsing on the floor. Doesn't mean you're giving your character up, because you can gain sanity back. Okay, and there's certain things you can do. So you can spend a night of drinking or gambling, all the way up to getting 6 back. You're going to have a year-long stay in asylum. So technically you are giving your character up at that stage, but so as long as you stay as long as you stay at 5, and I don't want to kind of spoil what's in this table in here. But yeah, we've got some fear rules as well. So when you make a fear check, if you fail it from 1 to 3, you're just going to act at disadvantage. If you fail it between 4 and 10, you're going to flee. More than that, you're just going to roll around on the floor, bubbling. So yeah. Vehicle rules in here. So we've got some driving rules, driving offensively and defensively. It's that gangster sort of feel, you know, someone hanging off the side of a car with a Tommy gun driving down the street. It's going to allow you to bring this into the games. Stealth rules is going to be opposed rule, so obviously it's, you know, it's the difference between the player's stealth and you as the games master, you know, the detect role. Light, darkness, because lanterns in this game will go out 15 for most things, because there was basic electricity back then, but it was either light or, sorry, it was used through gas, wasn't it? So yeah, we've got some light rules, and obviously if the players are fighting in the dark, then it's going to be at disadvantage. Initiative is dealt with in, I've seen this in the Gits games before, and it might be unique to other people, but everyone's going to have initiative, and it's normally going to be from 1 to 6. And the player then will roll a d6, and they're looking to roll under their initiative. If you roll under it, you will act in the fast phase. If you fail that roll and roll above it, you're going to go in the slow phase. So the fast phase is where the players will go. The NPC phase is then the monster's enemy in act, and the slow phase is for those that failed their initiative. They will go at the end. Again, another wonderful example. On your turn, you can do things like move in and then do an action or half action. So an action, as it sounds, you can do 1. Half action, you can do 2. Examples of which are in here. So things like half actions, drawing a weapon, shooting, aiming, full action, doing a full move, heavy melee attack using a skill, cast in a spell. So theoretically, you can shoot twice in this game. When you're making attack rolls, depending if it's a melee attack, you can do your strength plus relevant skill. If you're shooting, it's going to be dex plus relevant skill, which should be range. Defending will depend on the armor and the DC of the character. You can use things like shields to increase the DC to hit. If you exceed or hit that DC, you're going to do damage relevant on the weapon. Then you just roll the damage, and that's going to come off the health. If you roll crits or fumbles, this is really good actually. So when you roll a d20, you can do one of 4 things. You can make the weapon damage explode. The character, you can gain advantage on your next attack. You can reduce the target's DC by 5. Or the character party's members all receive a +1 to the next attack. Equally, when fumbles kick in, the character's going to have disadvantage on the next roll. The weapon may jam. All characters are at -2, so it's equally good and bad on the 20s and 1s. We've got some standard conditions that I think most players will be used to, and it just tells you what happens in the impact of things like burning. There's an optional rule here for injury consequences. So you don't have to use it, but obviously if you want to include it, you can do random rolls for hit locations and the sort of where the damage is going to be and how that will affect the players, which mainly will be sort of disadvantage to anything relevant that you're trying to do with that area. Death comes to all of us, and once you get to 0 wounds, you are fallen unconscious. You will stay alive in your unconscious state here, and for a number of rounds have passed equal to their health attribute. So you got a fair bit of time, potentially, that before someone can get to you to heal you. Arcane, there are 2 different types of magic in this, and no player, depending on your background, but no player should be starting with any knowledge of spells. Okay, we've got ritual spells and sigil spells. Ritual spells are how they sound. They're quite sort of grandiose in style. This is summoning gods, things like that, and they're going to take a long time to cast. You will be rolling every hour on the cast. There are 10 example rituals in here. It does say, as a games masters and players, you can come up with your own, and you're going to be rolling against the difficulty level here. So let's say we got this summon 1. The ritual for summoning from ghouls to gods. It's going to cost you 5 of your power points. It's going to take 3 hours, so you're going to need to 3 successive rolls and a difficulty 14. And you're going to need a variety of items as well to help that sort of ritual take place. And then we've got sigil magic, which says the characters need to etch a sigil into an item that you're carrying or wear. So stone, piece of wood, more permanent piece. I think I would allow my players to carve it into themselves, potentially as well, if I wanted to be that sort of games master. And we've got 10 sort of, these are instant spells, okay, but it does tell you how many times a day that you can cast it for, because it's sort of how long it's going to technically last. And again, we've got the same sort of difficulty number in here, and it just gives you an idea of using sigils and how they're going to work. That's it for players. Players then are out. Games Masters only from here on in. And the Games Master section will talk about some influences, The Untouchable, Godfather, Public Enemies, variety of books. Bit more into the setting of the 1920s and 1930s. Obviously, you can set this wherever you want. The game is designed from an influence point of view to be set in Chicago, but you can, it's up to you. You can take it in England, Lovecraft. You can take it to New York, wherever you want to set this book as well. You can also, if the players don't want to be Gits, you can make them investigators, investigating nice people. I wouldn't I wouldn't. We all play heroic players, and one of the beautiful things the Gits books all do is allow the players to play, well, quite frankly, assholes. And that is a refreshing change from most heroic books. Obviously, you're going to have connections with mafia figures, and then obviously Eldritch Gits is morally grey in area because it is, you're not out and out bad guys because you're just a git. A git isn't necessarily a evil person, a sinister person, but they tend to be someone that is annoying, frustrating. So yeah, just go with it. It's up to the players. Allow the players to play the game they want to play, but the whole purpose of these Gits games is just having a bit more fun than you would normally have in these sort of settings. And it will take you through running the game, encounters, how to deal with insanity, milestones, when you should be handing out the experience to the players. We've then got a variety of examples of cults and how they sort of started, and then we'll get into some more influential figures and notable NPCs in the setting, and then we've got the details of the Eldritch gods. And then finally we're going to get into foes and horror. Okay, and this will take you through lots of cultists, deep ones. Every NPC in here has got artwork, which I always appreciate. It does help the players, especially when we're thinking about eldritch monsters and ghouls and ghosts. Get an idea. If someone said Hound from the Angles, we've got a description here. We know how far it's going to move, which is a lot further than a player. It's got a +4 hit modifier, which isn't bad. Defense is 17. It's going to be quite hard to hit. 16 wounds. Okay. Sanity modifier. This is going to basically move the player's character, sanity. It's going to be harder for them to pass that sanity check, and it's got the attacks then special. But we get to know what it looks like, how, and you can kind of feel this saliva just coming off, and in a way, describe the breath. We've all been too close to dogs' faces, and I love my dogs, but sometimes their breath is hideous. Migos, night gaunts, police, possessed hobo, which is amazing. And then we've got some, normal. I always say standard animals. I just mean animals. And then finally, we do have the adventure. I probably should have said in the pack there are 3 maps in this adventure. I'm not going to talk about what's going on in the adventure, but there are 3 maps in the adventure there. And during that adventure, obviously for the players, you're going to find it difficult to pull the maps out of the page. But luckily, Jay has got you covered, and the 3 maps are actually included in their GM pack, which is brilliant. The value for money wise. So yeah, I've got, say, 2 moans, which is font used and that layout of that base. That's it. This is amazing. I've always enjoyed Fantasy Gits. I've played Space Gits by myself, never actually got into a proper game of it. I had an absolute blast playing Fantasy Gits. This runs exactly the same. It's very simple. D20, everything else roll over. If it's a save, just take your tribute, roll under. You've got a little bit of working out, but all you got to do is take off -10 when you're adding your stats. There's a lot of skills in here that I think people will either enjoy that or not enjoy it. But there's plenty of games that have this, and even if you aren't skilled in it, there's a good chance you should have, as long as you haven't been totally unlucky, or at worst you can have a minus. So you're almost 50-50 on a lot of skill checks. So it's not a harsh game by any means. The sanity rules are amazing. It comes with an adventure at the start. All creators, please put adventures in your book like Jay does. Jay does it with every book I've ever read of his and covered, and even, well, not covered, but you've read myself, is they always come with adventures, which I deeply appreciate. It just gives you that jumping off point as a games master. You're going to get the maps included in there. So we got 5 different roles in a party. If you've got a party of 6, it's not going to have too much of effect if you've got 2 playing the same, because their backgrounds are going to be wildly different. The character creation bit, if you've never generated a random background character, these books are for you. If you've never picked up a random generated character, this is a very good way of getting into it. And if Cthulhu isn't for you, go and pick up if you're a fantasy fan, pick up fantasy. If you're a space fan, pick up space. You're going to have an absolute blast as a games masters and players coming together, doing things that, you're going to end up with that sort of Han Solo type character. Someone that's quite happy just to murder someone, because he did shoot first. But they're going to be charming. That they are slightly the wrong side of the rules and the law. And the fact that you can play this 1920s, 1930s straight Cthulhu, straight mobster, or on the flip side, go investigators. You've basically got 3 games in one. And at £15, which is about $20 US, it's an absolute steal. It's a wonderful system, wonderful game. Say, if Cthulhu's not for you, Jay's got you covered with the 2 other options, and more coming. I'd say in the interview that's going to come up right at the end of this video, he talks about extra books coming. He's talking about doing these as a box set. So once I think it was 6. I'm sure he said he's got 6 different ones so we got 3 more themes, and we were trying to sort of guess what themes. But let me know down in the comments below, what themes would you would you want Jay to go for next, or after that, because I'm sure he's probably working on the next one already. But I think I've rambled enough, and you can see why I love all the Gits books. Great thing, great fun. Old school, it is a little bit on the brutal side, so if you want heroic Cthulhu type games, this isn't that. This is going to be far more fun than having that out and out heroic stuff. So I'm going to call it there. Go and get this. You will have an absolute bloody blast. Thank you for watching. My name's Adrian, and I'll see you on the next one.